What's up, folks? Casual Dad here, a little bit late to talk the Emperor's Children Season Battle Pass. Pretty excited about this one. It's not super long, but there are some pretty notable buffs in here and some pretty cool stuff. And it lays the groundwork for our first Demon Primarch in Fulgrim himself coming down the pipe at some point soon. So I'm going to run through the balance changes. I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about each of them. I'll look at the rewards in the Battle Pass. And then at the end, I'm going to clip in another video that I recorded on Friday talking about the experience with laddering the lion and to see how far I actually got. But yeah, no teasers on that. So jumping right in, we've got greetings, citizens. With the end of the Warp Spider season, we find that Eldari are followed by their most insidious foe, the followers of Slaanesh. Most prominent among them are the Emperor's Children, with a brand new army, at least as rule sets are concerned. It's great to be able to get Fulgrim's sons more heavily into the game as they arrive on the tabletop. The season's adjustments are therefore focused on the followers of Chaos, as well as a follow-up on the adjustments to lower-cost Berserk cards, and a buff to the Silent King. Didn't even tease us about it, just went out and said, the Silent King. So let's get stuck in. All right, first off, we got Chaos right out of the gate. One of the staple oldest sitting cards in the entire faction goes up to 5 points instead of 3. Also got plus 25 base wounds and plus 15 base melee. So now the Daemonette of Slaanesh actually punches fairly well. So she's a really strong pick in a Skull Taker deck now. While a Daemonette is by no means a powerful model, nor among the greatest servants of She Who Thirsts, it is nonetheless a demon and therefore a significant threat to your average mortal, which she was not. And therefore, with this in mind, Siblis was a bit at odds as one of the cheapest available Chaos cards. With a 2-point increase, they get a significant bump to wounds and melee, while still fulfilling the role as one of the cheapest available taunt cards for the faction. Yeah, at 5, there's nothing else in here that competes with that for quite a ways. So you've got your 4 and your 5, and it's just a better choice now because the hit points are still really low. So there's still a gamble there where your taunt is just going to get wiped out. But with the utility of the melee and the damage reduction of a higher level taunt, it's not bad. I've been playing this a little bit, and it's been a pretty effective card. So that's cool because I've found myself recently more and more passing over that card. So it's good to have a reason to try it again. Next up, we have Mistress Azalea in the 20s. Here we go. Mistress Azalea, Infernal Enrapturess of Slaanesh. And this is one I've honestly avoided a little bit because as an adult, I consider myself as someone who has a fairly strong stomach, but this model still freaks me out on many different levels. I don't love this one. But gets plus 14 ranged, which is immediately noticeable, and plus 6 melee. So they are pretty scary now, and actually does add quite a bit to a ranged Chaos deck that wasn't necessarily there before. A ranged Inspiring Presence at the 16-point mark is nice. The Enrapturess, God, hard to say that fast, has sat at a spot that has left it easily overlooked, which is less than ideal, especially given its status as an older epic. While the intent Enrapturess has no issues on survivability with high wounds and a secondary trait of fear, the damage output was somewhat lacking. Yeah, there's never any reason to take it because it's just didn't do anything. We've now fixed this with significant buffs to both attacks. Additionally, as a ranged primary card, there are less good options for powerful Chaos ranged builds, but the influx of new Emperor's Children cards should help expand this roster. And Azalea now sits as a tempting and thematic support card for a cacophonist host. And I do hope, and there's a lot of sort of hints here that we may see some proper Noise Marines coming soon to the game, which we already have the one Fancy Pants one. We don't have like your classic standard Noise Marine, so I expect we'll see those at some point soon. But next up, we have Lucius the Eternal, who also got new artwork, and you saw it flicker there just for a minute so you could see the difference. Freaky new model, and this is one of those ones that just looks kind of messy in the photo, but in person, I imagine it's very impressive. And the old one was very static, so I'm pretty excited to see this. Not only is it scaled up, but just feels so much more appropriate for the modern line, where it would feel pretty weird to field the old school Slaanesh now. But excuse me, Lucius. Lucius the Eternal, Emperor's Children champion, and this is a guy already where with Furious Charge, Fearless, and a very high base melee stat and good hit points, if you're running a melee Chaos deck, it's really hard to pass this guy up, just as a tar pit that also punches really hard. And now he recently was buffed, and now he got an additional plus 9 base melee. So that melee stat is getting really, really high, especially in that 24 points cost range. He's a great card. I don't know if people just aren't running him or what. Lucius is a standout champion for Slaanesh and the Emperor's Children, And while already a viable option, the little extra buff couldn't hurt. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to say no to it. The Peerless Swordsman narrows even further the list of opponents that can go toe-to-toe with him. Now, this is a really intimidating piece, where before, I would usually line a tar pit up against him if I was playing against Lucius, and just kind of let him whittle them down slowly, and it would take time. Now he's a genuine threat, where I can't just tie him down with a tar pit for a while, because that's a lot of damage. Um, yeah, this was a shock. I didn't expect him to get another buff because he'd already gotten one, but yeah, it's punchy. Now, I don't use him very much in my melee heavy decks because one of the ones I'm running a lot is Supreme Commander Abaddon. And for him, I want that melee buff. I don't want the melee debuff. So that's one reason I don't run him. But in a Skull Taker deck, he makes it into a lot of mine. A lot of other decks, he really has a strong place. So next up, we have the Mask, the Warlord itself. Another one where the Mask's ability is excellent, but those stats are pretty lacking. But so plus 11 base melee, which still leaves it pretty low, but is still not nothing, for sure. While we await the inevitable reemergence of Fulgrim from the warp, we need a figurehead to lead the new wave of Slaaneshi warriors, and who better than the Mask? With lots of new toys to play with, the Mask gets a strong melee buff to make them a fair bit stronger in the event they take the field, which they're not supposed to. If you have a Mask deck, the Mask itself is not supposed to actually land, but there it is. And then we got a surprise. We got a little random buff in here. One I appreciate because this is an older card I personally really enjoy, but have a hard time justifying putting in the deck. Oh, he's much more expensive now, so where are you, buddy? Wow, he's a lot more expensive. Where'd you go? I'm looking for the Honored. That's not him. It is. Wow, this is old artwork. Okay, yeah, he did get the glow up, and a long time ago. I forgot about it. Being one of the low hit point, low cost Berserk cards, he was in a bit of an awkward spot. I really like him because of the melee buff, very good hit points for the cost, and his melee wasn't bad, but he got +8 cost, so he went from 10? Is he 10? Wow, 10 to 18. Plus 40 wounds, so his wounds are dramatically better, and then level up increases scaled up, so his base melee is actually higher based on his level than it was before, and he's Black Legion. Yeah. As mentioned, we're picking up on lower cost Berserk cards and giving them a bit of love. In fact, this season, all Berserk cards at 10 or less points are getting a glow up. For Gorzrak, we've upped his cost and wounds to make the most of his Berserk rather than rework his identity. With his points increase, we've also upscaled his stats levels up by +2 per level, meaning that he'll end up at max level with an additional 54 wounds and 15 melee, which will make him much more threatening as an elite possessed Marine should be. And now that +2 melee or +15 melee seems low, but he's common, so it's not terribly surprising. And then with the buffs you can build up with Berserk, that adds up pretty quick. So he is kind of a tough choice with that. So all of his weaknesses were shored up, but then a great big new one was added in that cost. So I'm curious to see if he still works out, but this does invalidate a lot of my Supreme Commander Abaddon decks because I didn't have an extra 8 points to play with. So we'll see. This feels like a very cautious take where he was fixed up. He's definitely dramatically improved, but he's also enough more expensive that he competes with much better stuff at that range. Where at 10, this would have felt kind of appropriate, but we'll see how he works out. I'm curious. We'll see. Next up, we have another surprise. There were a couple ones just sort of thrown in there. Corprax the Wallbreaker, one of the oldest cards in the entire Warhammer Combat Cards line, got +1 cost from 11 to 12. Plus 10 wounds, which is nice because his wounds were laughably low, and then plus 10 ranged. Quite apart from the flamboyant Emperor's Children, Corprax the Dour Iron Warrior is also getting a glow up. As mentioned, the new card should bring some life into Chaos ranged builds, and as an older card, Corprax is one expected to see more use. As it stands, he's woefully underperforming, so an all-around buff at the expense of minor cost increase should do him some good. And yeah, he's dramatically better, and like those are actually respectable hit points where they weren't before. His damage was fine, and his trait of Big Game Hunter was very helpful for where he lands. He's just always been tough to justify because he's ranged and you don't have the cards to back him up in a ranged Chaos deck, which now I really think is a great time to try that, and I'm curious to see how it goes. I may try a ranged Mask deck. We'll see how that goes. All right. And then we're going to dip around into some other factions a little bit, and these changes felt a little bit odd. Just to go ahead and say it. Looking at We get Thestral the Flenser, and this one went from trait change, went from Berserk to Deathblow. You may have noticed that already. Level 3 change went from wounds to melee, so lost one wounds upgrade in the level tree in favor of a melee upgrade. Yeah, the next of the sub 10-point Berserkers, the Flenser is getting swapped to Deathblow, as well as changing 2 level upgrades from wounds to melee. Oh, 2 from wounds to melee, making him much better suited to his new trait identity. And I appreciate the Deathblow, especially on a melee card. So this makes him pretty great in a Avatar deck as a filler piece. Also, I always used him in a Rakarth deck, just letting him rack up those extra wounds before you put him on the table to benefit more from Berserk. And I kind of liked having that cheap card that you could either play early as Chaff if you pulled him in the draw, or could play late, excuse me, or play late as a card that had built up a bunch of wounds to build up a bunch of Berserk. So this was a card where the low cost Berserk actually kind of worked for me, although I'd only just hit that rank 3 where I was really legitimately considering putting it in more decks. Deathblow, I don't see as much of a need for. Now it very much feels like an Avatar card where we already had Avatar cards for the we already had low-cost Deathblow melee cards that fit into the Avatar deck in Kalistri the Huntress. So it's a little bit odd, this change. So I would be curious to hear more about the justification on this one. But yeah, I mean, 2 Deathblow cards doesn't hurt. It's nice to have that, but at the same time, that was a little bit of a head scratcher. So there are a couple trait changes here that I'm not sure how I feel about, and there may be one more coming. We're going to go ahead and jump to the Silent King buff. Dun, dun, dun. So this is a buff to his trait. Zarek, the Silent King, minus 10 cost. Ooh, I got to move him around in my playlist. And his rule has changed that ready value. Let's see. So it actually doesn't say here, but all of your cards ready. At the end of your turn, all of your cards ready. Before it was 100%, so they were just ready as normal. Now it's 125%. So at the end of each of your turns, your cards do an additional ready at a quarter more than they would normally. So they ready a little bit more than their base, which is pretty good. The trait was already pretty good with the cost decrease and this. That makes him a very much leaner, much more competitive piece. I think that the biggest issue with his win rate is that most people running the Silent King don't have a high level one, and that's a challenge. And that there, the points cost is going to help a lot. And if people are running him at low level with low level bodyguards, the trait bonus will help a lot too. So this is an all round buff that's especially good for low level Silent Kings. I really appreciate that. The Silent King is a very potent card, but with more Supreme Commanders available and their more regular appearance in Ranked, his cost is prohibitive in a 200-point format, sure. With this in mind, we brought his cost down to 100 to match the Primarchs, and also increase the value of his end of turn ready to help as well. While this may make him much more threatening in Apocalypse matches, there's no reason this is a bad thing. I'm assuming his win rate is somewhat on the middling side, so it feels pretty good to buff him without worrying too much about it biting anyone in the butt. So we'll see. Now we got a couple more interesting changes. Servants of the Emperor. We've got the... Ooh, I still got a thing. Looking at Sevora. Sevora Devout. Now she went from trait change from Berserk to Poison. Now I'm really all about this. Having a low-cost Poison card, this is great. Like, those are still very high respectable hit points. Berserk will, or Poison will let her do more damage over time than Berserk would have consistently, and still coming in at the 7 cost. So I'm pretty happy about this. I really like more Poison options. Poison, I feel, adds an urgency to the game when I'm playing against it, and when I'm playing with it, it's a huge utility. Will kind of help deal with the Poison and Shield spam that we're seeing in a lot of places, and makes her actually an okay pick in PvP in several decks. So I'm curious to see if this increases her play rate. We'll see. The final of our cheap Berserkers, that is the ones under 10 points, Sevora is getting a simple trait swap from Berserk to Poison. We haven't adjusted stats at this time, she's got a bunch of hit points, because she got buffed not too long ago, as the bulkier health pool is a big positive with Poison, allowing for more chance to spread the trait around more widely, especially if she's in a Greyfax deck. Base 130 means you get really big buffs to hit points if you put her in a deck with a decent bonus. As a faction, Servants of the Emperor do not have much access to Poison, so let's see how this does for them. That cracked me up because the cards that I use the most are Poison cards, and they actually have better access than most. Not than most, but they have obviously better access than Votann, Orcs, Necrons, or Tau. So 4 out of the 9 factions have less access to Poison than these guys do. Space Marines have less. Chaos has more. Eldari only has a couple. So like this actually, I think servants are actually one of the most poisonous factions. I think they're close to tied with Tyranids. So they're in the top 3 of the poison axis. So I was a little surprised by that note. Because yeah, all 5 of these bodyguards have poison, and all 5 of these bodyguards are viable on some level. Now this one less so, having the secondary trait of poison, but this one is one of the staples of a lot of my decks, just because I like the way he slots into decks and has that poison. I'm finally coming around to Kyrie Adraxis now that she's been buffed to a point where she's actually very good. Uh, and then you've got Melindy, who's in a lot of my decks too. So like, there's a lot of access to poison, but they are right that it's kind of split between different deck types, where you're unlikely to take more than one of these in the same deck. And that does make a difference. So I do appreciate that for sure. This is one that I was surprised by too. Go ahead and reset that. And we're looking for Trooper. This guy, our good old shovel boss. Death Corps of Krieg, Calm Specialist. Trait change from Scout to Outflank. And this one was funny. I actually really appreciated having this guy with the Scout because I had a bunch of cards that already have Outflank, but it wasn't in Krieg or Guard themed decks. It was in just like mishmash Servants decks where you have a lot of access. So a lot of the Krieg models have the Scout trait, and while that fits with a lot of them, we're swapping one here over to Outflank. This helps diversify the Krieg sub-faction roster and better represents their attritional nature. I appreciate that the random infantry Krieg piece is the one that has the outflank, and that this is being thought of around the specific Krieg sub-faction. That was cool. So I saw this, was like, I don't get it. And then I read that, I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. Okay. And then we've got a trait change to Space Marines. This is an interesting one too. This is a guy that I never use, but I have just banged my head against him really bad. Captain. Everybody's a captain. There we go, this guy. I have seen this guy in campaigns and had a really hard time dealing with him, but his trait, he has plus 20 wounds, so he's got significantly more wounds, and his trait change went from Shield to Inspiring Presence and Shield. So where before Shield was his primary trait, now Inspiring Presence is his primary, and he doesn't unlock Shields until level 9 and maxes out at 2 shields. Now that's a subtle nerf to shield spam, which I really appreciate, and also makes him a little bit more of a utility piece in that Inspiring Presence spot. So you don't just take him for the shields, you take him for the utility of that, which also means if you're taking cards just for the shields, you'll take one that's a little bit less durable or more expensive. So this is kind of nice. Finally, a simple change for Lysander. Inspiring Presence as a secondary epic trait always falls a little bit flat, sure. Since it doesn't hit the maximum buff available, meaning any other Inspiring Presence card is normally better. With this in mind, we switched over the shield and inspiring to his profile to compensate for the loss of several shields. We're bumping Lysander's health a little bit, which should help offset this. Now, he still feels pretty expensive for what he brings, especially now that he doesn't have that shield anymore until level 9. So I wonder how this is going to work out. I think he could probably use a pretty steep reduction in points to make him kind of a more viable utility piece, maybe in the 30s range. But who knows? We'll see. I obviously only have a level 3 of them, so I rarely experiment with them. So it's kind of up to other players to show me how tough Captain Lysander can be. Always love a little love for the Imperial Fists. Let's see. And this is cards added to the general pool. Let me go ahead and do reverse cost. Got this thing here. We got the Orcs Goth clan. And a lot of these are ones that I don't have. This guy here. Drognog. Then I'm very excited about this one. I was bummed to miss this guy when he was in the store, and I'm glad there'll be another chance here. I'm actually missing a lot of Space Marines, less than I was, but Ulrich the Slayer is one of the first models I ever saw when I was a kid looking at all this stuff, and he's an old model, but still one of the cooler sculpts to come out of the game ever, and especially for old school Space Wolves. This guy is, I believe, close to the same age as, unless he got a resculpt. I don't actually know, because this model looks really nice to be as old as I'm thinking it is, but I think he's really, really old. This has got to be new, because I remember him having the wolf helmet and being all blue like a chaplain, so yeah, different. Anyway, I remember Ulrich the Slayer. I remember the name. I remember being really cool, but look at that model. Look at this imposing dude. This is a guy you want to run, and you can stick him in with your Imperial Fist because there's enough yellow to kind of fit in the theme and some red for the trim. It's perfect. But he's now in the general pool, so I expect to get a copy of him at some point soon, which is very exciting. Then we got another Space Marine. We got this guy who I'm not sure I've ever even seen. This guy, Romulus, the Blade Guard veteran. We got some extra just random shields over there and a rare. Then we've got
Ulator, that one I may actually have. I do. Wow, I've got him at level 5. All right, there we go. Just got him in a pack somewhere. Nice. And then we've got Abraxas. I don't think I have him. Oh yeah, miss a launchy buddy. I could do the search again, but it's kind of fun poking around with this. Apologies for the delay. We'll look at this. I think I do have him. Abraxas, level 2. Got him at some point. And then we've got Cato Sicarius, who you may have gotten in a quest reward not too long ago. He was a big part of the, I want to say, the Skulls event last year. Big part of this. This one I'm really excited about too. Balthazar. There's several very cool psychers that I don't have that I'm excited to have access to. This guy, that combination of Furious Charge and the target acquired, that's pretty cool, and he's got decent stats. And I've just really enjoyed playing efficient melee punchers in Dark Angels playing with the Lion, and so I'm really, really excited to see this guy. Plus, he's got the wing helmet. More wing helmets is always good. Then we've got Termiel, and this guy beat the crap out of me in PvP the other day. And I was really excited to try him out, but I don't have him. But that Fear and Warp Surge with those stats, like he's really good. And then Tibble, who I do have. I'm sure that's not how you say his name, but it's funny. Tibble. Also one who I think is going to be very good at medium level, but who mine is only level 4. So he's not great yet, but he's coming up there. And then we've got a really cool model sculpt here. Got Carl. Captain Carleon. So we've got some more shields coming to Space Marine, so losing out on the shields on Lysander is not bad, although it may mean Lysander sees less play. But we're seeing a bunch more of these added to the pool, and it's cool to see Terminators with those like rounded stats, where the cost is a little bit up there, but they do a little bit of everything, and at least one thing well, which is very Terminator-y, and I like that. Then we've got the White Scars, and we've got both this guy here, and we've got this guy here, both coming to the general pool. Oops. I closed it. And then Spear Boy, this guy here. So the 3 new bikers, all 3 of those new bikers are being added to the general pool. We've got Ranged Scout, nice. We've got Outflank, nice. Then we've got Scout and Furious Charge, very nice. A really interesting combination of traits, and we are getting close to the point where we could run just straight White Scars. Showed Jateki in there. We're actually there. You could do a deck with this. I wouldn't be sure which warlord to run it with, but it's a fun idea. And then this guy actually got one of. I was really excited about this because I didn't have him. It's another one of these. This one. And I got him, I don't know when I got him, but it was pretty cool to get this guy in a random drop in one of those collection unlocked packs. So very nice. And then I'm curious to see these ones because I don't have these. Because we're looking at the Mauler Fiend. This one. Love a good Mauler Fiend. It's always one of those cool models. I want to have one of these one day. I don't. The Fiend model, and I really go back and forth whether I want to build a Mauler Fiend or a Forge Fiend. I feel like the Mauler Fiend is exotic enough because they're less common, but the Forge Fiend is just so cool, and it's hard to know. It's hard to know. I'll agonize over the decision forever until I actually build one and then end up building both. But yeah, he's coming in, and then we've got this thing. Ugh, another heavy melee Nurgle card with regen in the low points range with high hit points, though, so that's very tempting. And then, of course, we've got Cranon. So a lot of the rewards that a lot of players will have because of the events, but they're coming into the game now. We got Cranon. Cranon the Relentless, still one of the coolest models ever produced by GW. And then we've got Foul Touch, one of the greatest utility pieces we've seen in Warhammer combat cards. Naxos Foul Touch, the Psionic Blast Poison Psyker. If you throw all of your wild cards at him, you can be like me and have him where he has both Psionic Blast and Poison. Great utility. It's I'm very excited to get Gloggothrox like way up the ladder one of these days. I haven't done it yet, but I do think he's a key piece of that now. And then we've also got the Malignant Plaguecaster, who I don't think I have this guy actually. This is a cool model. No, I don't have him. Oh yeah, Noxious Blightbringer. Wow, I was totally wrong on that. But very cool combination. He now looks very much like one of the others where he's got Inspiring Presence and Fear on Epic. Very cool. would be a great partner for Typhus, which I love to see a thematic Nurgle card that would be a great companion to Typhus. Because he also is Epic, who has a secondary trait of Fear and very similar kind of stat line. Wants to melee, but mix it in with another attack type. So, yeah, pretty excited about that one. And that is it. That is our full list of balance changes. We're going to take a quick look at the rewards for the Battle Pass. But I got to scroll all the way to the top. Apologies. I did get it was a really good, relaxing day off today, so I did get to go ahead and play quite a bit. Lucius himself comes in at level 1, at the first tier of the premium battle pass. And then we're looking at, and I'm mostly looking at the premium rewards because the free ones are kind of going to get either way. And we got this thing, which mine is, as you can see, very low level, so I never use it, but it's tempting. It's common and only 19 points, so it's a really good Slanesh piece to put in, especially in a melee deck. It's got that melee ready. I never put it in because mine's so low level, but the combination of stats and abilities is nice. I believe it also has really high initiative, so it'll make your decks go faster. Then, of course, a giant pile of this one will comfortably get me closer to that max level. And then the cosmetics are, you can't click on them to see them, but they're pretty intense. They're very much what you'd expect from Slanesh. Definitely throwbacks to Lucius's model, and then also a little bit reference the sword of Fulgrim himself, which we'll see when that comes up. I'm very curious to see that one. Then we got this one, Azalea. I'm not super pumped about the extra copies. It's only 3 copies of an epic, but it's there. And then we've got, of course, this Syl-esque, still one of the best cards that Chaos has, period. And one of the better cards for Slanesh as well. Really good. The triple attack type with, this is level 6, and you can see the triple attack type here already with good hit points. Expensive, but offers a lot for that cost. Really impressive card. And then we've got, this is possibly my favorite card back ever. The like super rich gold color and the contrast with the purple gem. I just want to see it bigger. I just want to. So, and then we got more of these. That brings your total up to 18, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Then you get your Noise Marines, Frenzix Shatterhowl, so not the classic Noise Marine, but the rockin' 80s one. And really good combination of traits. This puts him on par with, what's his face, Mogan Ra and Eldari, but for 10 points cheaper with, I think, more hit points. But of course, he does less range damage until you get him really high up there. Still, really good piece to consider in your ranged Chaos decks. And then, of course, we have probably the best card that the Chaos faction has, the Keeper of Secrets. And that one plus Syl-esque in a Mask deck pretty much is one of the only decks in the game that's an all-comers deck where you can take down anybody, where you can compete in the same attack type as any other deck out there. That's very rare. And Slanesh is particularly good at it. Got that portrait. Whole lot of this little guy. And then a whole lot of this little guy. Get a lot of that target acquired. So the pure Slanesh really comes out in this Battle Pass more, I think, than any other one I've seen. This level of sub-faction focus is pretty cool, and I've really enjoyed seeing that. Of course, the mask itself getting 10 copies, which will get you pretty high up there if you don't have the mask yet. That's a good one to see a Warlord with 10 copies in here. I feel like that also is unusual. I don't know if a lot of players don't have the mask or what. It's been hard to get the mask for a while. And of course, you can see that I don't even have Shalaxi Hellbane, the kind of super classic Keeper of Secrets. Having both Keepers of Secrets accessible, like you put in here, and they're very frightening cards. To have both of them on the board, you have a triple attacker in 2 different slots that has great hit points and has a good combination of stats. Both of them having fear at that level of hit points and a bunch of damage is really very intimidating. And then, of course, you have the Noise Marine Cannon for that banner at the end there. Yeah, so there's your Battle Pass rewards in addition to the other packs on the side there. Oh, yeah, and there's that portrait. Oh, yeah. But yeah, I might have missed something, but we'll see. But yeah, pretty exciting. So again, ooh, nice. Nice. Well, I keep getting kicked out of that. I was like 14 and then people have been playing. So anyway, yeah, I did it. So that's where we are. Stay tuned for a little bit of a update on the Lion, but otherwise, happy gaming. Talk soon. Oh, folks, I don't know if I can do it.
So we are now, I'm recording this on Thursday night. I've got a busy weekend with Valentine's Day coming up and some friends coming to town. I don't know how much I'm going to play, so this may be where I have to call the challenge. Yeah, so I've been playing almost exclusively the Lion for the last 2 weeks of the ladder season, and I've learned a lot about myself. No, it's been really, really fun. It's been dramatically easier than I expected actually to get up to 3K. And one of the reasons I say that is because I'm doing it with fairly low level cards. If I had any of these at max level, like there are 4 or 5 cards in this whole set, if I had them at max level, or if I had at least level 9 of some epics I'm not running, it would have been really easy to get this far. And I think 3.5K is totally reasonable. But I am currently sitting at 2.892. Ugh. My peak, I believe on Tuesday, I hit 3.25K. I was so close. I was going to get it. But I'm at the point where anytime you get into Terra, your matches do get dramatically harder. At least that's my impression. I could just be completely jumping at shadows there. It could also be the time in the season. But so I'll get to 3K, I'll get to 3150, and then I'll just immediately get knocked back to 2900, and then do it again, and then boom, because I'm doing 2 and 1, where I'm winning 2 and losing 1, and it depends a lot on which ones I win and which ones I lose. I could get 45-45 and then lose 80 if I lose to a deck that's underrated below me. And the higher your trophy count gets, the higher risk those losses are. So it's pretty frequent where I would go 2-1, end up 10 trophies higher than I'd started, or I'd go 2-1 and end up 15 trophies lower than I'd started. So it was a lot of up and down, back and forth. You can easily climb, but I've gotten up to 3150, 3200. I haven't hit that 3250 again, but I think you get 3200 again one more time. But yeah, it's just at the point where I could probably push through and get to it, but the amount of time involved would be pretty huge for a very limited gain. So I do think the stretch goal is doable. I'm just not going to hit it. But just to look at some of the decks I used to get there, this is kind of an evolution of the first one that I did in the beginning that I was talking about, that double Medicae, leaning on this guy, and then Ezio as your budget hitter. Your 20-point slot here, I've got that Inspiring Presence. And then the 11-point was tricky to fill in. I wound up going for this guy because the bonus attacks are really impactful. And the bonus attacks are when the lion is on the table, one of your bodyguards can do defensive attack. The combination of that and Death Blow, plus his really high melee stat, was an awesome, awesome bonus to the 11 points. So he's really definitely made up the points basically every single game, whether I won or lost. So that was good. This was fun, and this is actually the deck, like this one right here exactly is the one I played through from about 1,000 trophies all the way through to 2,500. And then I started noticing it starting to taper off. So this is one that was really effective, and I've really enjoyed it. The big thing I would change here is I need these guys to be higher level. Ezio having a little bit more hit points would be huge. Um, Getting that rank 4 regen would be massive for this guy, and that melee buff. Like you really, one of the things here is when I'm going 2-1 at the end of the season, one of the big reasons why is I'll lose to something by like 20 hit points, where it's just like right there and I just can't kick it through to the end. And that's a combination of bodyguards not having quite the stats that they could. So like if this was here, I would have won. I would have been just rocketing through the ladder. It's like it's that close of a difference that was consistently falling behind just by a teeny tiny bit. So I'm really excited to get him there. And then, of course, the Lion himself being level 5, I just like that level would have been huge because there are so many matches where it was just the Lion against the opposing Warlord. Maybe there were a couple bodyguards, but I had one slightly buffed attack, free and clear, but they'd have like 160, 180 hit points. And I just didn't have enough of a bonus to get through it. Where with this, that makes it closer. And if you get up to here, where he starts shooting for an actual meaningful amount, like that makes a massive difference because his ranged attack clears shields, kills injured cards. Like he does a lot shooting first. And getting him to upper level, this would be a really fun commander when I get him there. So I'm excited to pump him full of my wild cards and get him up there too. But yeah, and that's it, where it really does come down to card level at this point. That was really the deciding factor in a lot of these. Because the unfavorable matches, it was things like Rakarth, where I just couldn't punch through it in time, or Eldrad, who did so much damage that he was able to burn through this pretty quickly, or one of the tougher matches was Darkstrider. No surprise, because he's able to just shuffle damage on these and absorb the free attacks and hit things you don't want to hit multiple times. And Akaran also, of course. Psychic Akaran was especially challenging. This deck really is a hard time with Psychic because it leans a lot on readying and getting those defensive attacks as long as you can, and that doesn't work against the Psychic deck. So where this started hitting a wall, I started playing with this. And this is a slight variant, but Mephiston being the kind of what I consider the defining card of the entire Space Marines faction. Obviously, I should have reached for him first. He is incredible and holds up this deck by himself, which is just insane what he can do. But you really need to keep him alive, and so that rank 3 fear is huge. And now we're not talking about insignificant levels here. Like this is a big upgrade on what he is at this level. If nothing else in any of my decks changed, if I got him up to fear rank 3 and those additional attack stats, especially that ranged attack and that melee, it would have made a huge difference. Like even having that 77 psychic was really big, and did just a ton of damage. It was really good against psychic mirrors if I was going up against psychers, and it was really good if I was just readying to kind of build up attack stats and preserve my offensive advantage. And that death blow is crazy. So up here, having that with the death blow, with the damage reduction of the fear rank 3 and the extra hit points, like this guy gets super powerful. But if you have him in this range, upwards of that like level 10, level 11, this deck should perform really, really, really well, whether your line is this high or not. This guy's really good. He's nearly max for me. I'm very close to getting him maxed. Yeah, and just a really good performer for 8 points. Good hit points, good melee, and that melee ready helped buff up everyone else in the faction because this deck wasn't big enough for me to put in the Inspiring Presence. Double Medicae again to keep him and the Lion alive. Having these guys on the table and dropping Medicae on them makes them really punch above their weight and really take down a lot of stuff, and takes a while to bring them down. Then this guy again, because I found him be a cheap, efficient 11 points. I just rebuilt this. I'm not sure I would keep him in the 11 slot here. I might try either swap these around for some combination of fear and shields, but they do add a lot of the offensive buff, so I'm not really sure about that. And just to try to check my biases, I also was doing just plain old math efficiency decks, was just like, what are 20-point cards I could slot in here? So I just did the slider down to like, had the max card value of 20 points, and then kind of pulled out the stuff I could that had good melee, and then shuffled a bit. I played a lot with Fear. I played a little bit with Taunt, a little bit with Target Acquired. I personally found that Taunt was bad in Lion decks because usually it could keep some of your cards alive, but way too often you ended up with Taunt on the table when you wanted to counterattack somewhere else. But like Taunt prevents people from swinging at the Lion, or if he's absorbing that on shields, you want stuff to kill the things attacking him. Whereas if Taunt is out there, they build up and you get a couple turns where you're not getting the momentum you need. So I stopped including Taunt, but I appreciated the durability that Fear offered. And so this guy was in here for extra durability, and it's pretty great. He's also got a good melee attack. He was a good piece, but I think you can do better. And these guys are just mainstays that were very, very good. This guy with Target Acquired could be really good because Target Acquired is something I missed in these decks, and there was no card that really had the hit points and punch that I wanted that also had Target Acquired. And he would do it, but I don't have level 9 of him yet. But yeah, so this was fun. Just like, what do I have in this points range? I want 5 bodyguards that are 20 points each. And then you can kind of look at that and play with what you would do there. Talk about it, some of the honorable mentions that I was looking at in these decks. I did try this guy, but mine is too low level to really make a difference, especially with those hit points. That was too low. If you're running a thin deck, having something that squishy is just total bait for a lot of decks out there. Get him up here, and even then his loadout, his hit points are still just too low. It didn't work, although I tried to do him for Target Acquired. This guy, his base attack stats are too low. This guy's hit points are too low. These guys I did try. This one, I had an efficiency deck that was a full deck. If you're looking like 12 points each, you can actually have a full 6 bodyguards, and that was pretty effective. But there were just some matchups where it just wasn't enough because none of them individually had the attack stats to really get momentum in there. They were all okay, but if I was ever outmatched, there was no way to make it up strategically, just because they didn't have the resources. I did toy with a mixed fear list with this guy and the other two down here. This guy is excellent. Really, really good. He's one of the best cards to include in these decks. I think that if you have high level of him, he will serve you very well. And of course, Ezio. And this guy, his melee is really good. I had some very successful decks where I have him in there instead of one of the other Medicaes. And he's, I think, worth it, but it was just tough to make the points work out. No surprise. And if you got him, you might as well go to this guy um, for the psychic attacks as well. This guy, though, if you have that 20-point slot open and you've got this guy with at least one shield, or I mean, if you have him with two shields, man, game on. Just put this guy in here in a second because that combination of stats with Inspiring Presence and shields would be incredible. And it is funny to see this because this guy just completely blows this dude out of the water. Just like, why would you take this guy if you have this guy as an option? So yeah, that was an interesting discovery. He's got like 3 more melee or something. And this guy takes forever to level up. Well, right now he's absolutely not comparable, but up here he's getting there. So this guy I think is one of the best cards you can possibly include with a lion. Obviously mine is low level, so I can't. And then another honorable mention I would love to include is the Chaplain Moors. This guy. Oh man, I want this guy leveled up so bad. This guy really wants to be in a lion deck. Get him up here. Good stuff. Combination of ranged, melee, fear, pretty cheap, and then also has that Furious Charge in there too, just as a bonus. Very good card, but you got to have him pretty high level, and he is legendary. Now to look at some of the other ones that I think are going to be really good, again, I kept reaching for Blood Angels. Especially Death Company and Blood Angels were really definitely high on my list of things that I wanted to run. Like all 3 of these guys in this points range, I wanted to run all of them, and I believe they're all Berserk. This guy's Furious Charge, yeah. But I mean, even that, like that's really good. Their stats are really good. It's cool thematically to have all of them in there. Um, yeah, maybe not. But I mean, at 12 points, those are good stats, especially with the melee ready. This is the one. Yeah, this guy. This guy I really wanted in there. That is the one I really want to be in my 12-point slot to have that balance of melee and ranged with the okay hit points. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, poor Baron. Just this is one of the cases you just don't want taunt. So anyway, that's where we're at. I won't take this. I won't make this video any longer than it has to be already. But it's been really fun. I've been really enjoying the challenge, and it was really satisfying play. It was hard. It's some of the toughest laddering play I've ever done, and I just barely even squeaked into Terra today because I was finally like, you know what, I'm gonna get into Terra for the end of the season, whether it's with the Lion or not. Um, but yeah, still, I played the Lion exclusively from I think 600 trophies straight up to 30 to 3,000, and then up and down a little bit. Um, yeah, it was really wild going from that to my other more standard decks, and just it was so easy clearing, just progressing a little bit as compared to what it was with the Lion. So yes, it is hard. The comment stays true, Verabaka, that it is hard to ladder with the Lion, and I don't recommend it for new players, but it is incredibly satisfying and it was really fun. So if you want to try it, do it. Let's see it. So, yeah, let me know what you think.